Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the most amazing building he had ever seen. The Galactic Academy of Sciences stretched high into the purple sky of Zentari Prime, its walls made of some kind of crystal that caught the light from 3 different suns. The whole structure seemed to glow and pulse with a soft blue light that made Jake feel dizzy if he stared too long. He pulled his backpack tighter on his shoulders and walked toward the main entrance. Other students moved around him, but none of them looked anything like humans. Some had 4 arms and blue skin. Others floated a few inches off the ground and seemed to be made of light. A group of bug-like creatures clicked and buzzed as they walked past, their many eyes turning to stare at Jake as he passed. Jake had dreamed of this moment for 2 years. He was the first human ever accepted into the Academy, the most important school in the galaxy. Back on Earth. He had been just another college student studying biology. His grades were good, but not amazing. His test scores were decent, but not perfect. But somehow, out of millions of applications from across human space, his had been chosen. The acceptance letter had arrived on a Tuesday morning. Jake remembered opening it at breakfast while his roommate ate cereal and complained about their economics professor. The words had been simple and direct. The Galactic Academy welcomed Jake as their first human student. Classes would begin in 6 months. Transportation would be provided. His parents had been worried. His father kept asking if it was safe. Mother had cried when she realized he would be gone for 4 years with no visits home. But Jake knew he had to go. This was the chance of a lifetime. Now, walking through the entrance hall, Jake began to understand just how different this place would be from anything he had known. The ceiling was so high he could not see the top. Students floated, crawled, slithered, and walked in every direction. Some were tiny, no bigger than his hand. Others were huge, taking up space meant for 10 normal-sized beings. A soft chime sounded in his head. Suddenly he could understand every conversation around him. The universal translator had activated, turning all the strange sounds into clear English in his mind. Is that the human? He heard someone whisper. I heard they come from a death planet, another voice said. My teacher says their whole species evolved from killers. Jake tried to ignore the whispers and found the registration desk. The being behind the counter had green skin and eyes that moved independently of each other. One eye looked at Jake, while the other read from a floating screen. Name, the being asked in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. Jake Morrison, from Earth. Both eyes focused on him at once. Ah, yes, the human, you are expected. Here is your room assignment, class schedule, and student identification. A crystal chip floated through the air and landed in Jake's palm. Your advisor wishes to see you immediately, Dr. Kelvin Thorne. Office 2847. Jake thanked the being and made his way through the corridors. The walls showed moving pictures of different planets and star systems. Students sat in groups studying from books that projected words into the air. Everything was clean and bright and completely alien. He found Dr. Thorne's office after getting lost twice and asking for directions from a helpful snake-like creature that spoke in musical tones. The door was marked with symbols that the translator turned into human cultural studies in his mind. Jake knocked and heard a familiar voice. Say, come in. Dr. Kelvin Thorne looked to be about 50 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was the first human Jake had seen since leaving Earth, and the relief was immediate and surprising. Jake Morrison, I presume, Dr. Thorne said, standing up from behind his desk. Please, sit down. Welcome to the Academy. Jake sat in a chair that had clearly been designed for human proportions. Thank you, sir. It's good to see another human. Dr. Thorne smiled, but Jake noticed it did not reach his eyes. I imagine it is. Jake, I need to be honest with you about what you're facing here. I've been at this academy for 15 years, and I can tell you that being human comes with certain challenges. Kind of challenges. Prejudice, mostly. Dr. Thorne moved to the window and looked out at the campus. Most species in the galaxy know very little about humans. What they do know comes from stories, rumors, and reports that focus on our military capabilities and the dangerous nature of Earth. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. What kind of stories? The galaxy calls Earth a death world. They know that our planet has weather that can kill animals that hunt in packs, and natural disasters that would wipe out entire civilizations of more fragile species. They know that humans have fought wars, that we have weapons, and that we have spread across multiple star systems in just a few hundred years. But that's not the whole story, Jake said. Of course not. But it's the story they believe. To most beings here, humans are walking disasters waiting to happen. They see us as barely controlled predators who might turn violent at any moment. Jake looked down at his hands. They seemed ordinary to him, but he wondered what other species saw when they looked at them. Did they see the hands of a killer? I'm not trying to scare you, Dr. Thorne continued. But I want you to be prepared. You'll find that other students avoid you. Professors may treat you differently. Some beings will be afraid to be in the same room as you. Then why did they accept me? Because a few individuals in the Academy believe that understanding humans is important for the future of galactic relations. They think that having a human student here might help break down some of the fear and misunderstanding. You're not just here to learn, Jake. You're here to teach. Jake spent his first week attending classes and trying to make friends. The learning part was amazing. His xenobiology class taught him about life forms he had never imagined. Mathematics class showed him how different species approach problems in completely different ways. The Zentarians used four-dimensional thinking that hurt his head to follow. The Voidlings seemed to solve equations by feeling rather than calculating. But the social part was exactly as Dr. Thorne had warned. When Jake sat down at a table in the cafeteria, other students would find reasons to leave. During group projects, his assigned partners would ask the professor to be moved to different teams. In study groups, conversations would stop when he approached. The worst part was advanced xenobiology, taught by Professor Zixith. She was an Aetheran, tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow with its own light. Her species were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful philosophers who had never fought a war. They settled disputes through discussion and had created some of the most beautiful art in known space. Professor Zix made no effort to hide her feelings about having a human in her class. Every question she asked Jake seemed designed to highlight humanity's violent history. She would ask about human hunting techniques, human weapons development, or human territorial behavior. She never asked about human music, human literature, or human scientific achievements. Mr. Morrison, she said during one particularly difficult class, "Can you explain how humans justify the domestication of other species for food production?" Jake felt 20 pairs of alien eyes focus on him. "Well, Professor, humans developed agriculture and animal husbandry as ways to create stable food sources. It allowed us to build permanent settlements and develop civilization." "I see." "Did humans consider the rights or feelings of these domesticated species?" "I think humans did the best they could with the knowledge they had at the time. As we learned more about animal intelligence and emotion, many humans changed their practices." Professor Zixith's expression remained cold. "How convenient that your species' moral development coincided with your technological advancement." Jake had no answer for that. He looked around the classroom and saw expressions ranging from curiosity to fear to disgust. None of them looked friendly. After class, Jake walked back to his dormitory room, feeling more alone than he had ever felt in his life. His room was in a section designed for species that needed Earth-like atmosphere and gravity. The walls were plain metal, nothing like the beautiful crystal structures in the rest of the academy. It felt like a prison cell. He sat on his narrow bed and looked at the picture of his family he had brought from home. His parents smiled back at him from beside a lake where they had gone camping the summer before he left. They looked so normal, so harmless. But Jake was beginning to understand that in the eyes of the galaxy they were monsters. Tomorrow would bring another day of classes, another day of whispers and stares, another day of being treated like a dangerous animal in a place of learning. Jake wondered if he would ever be able to change their minds, or if he would spend 4 years being the token human who proved everything the galaxy already believed about his species. 3 weeks had passed since Jake's arrival at the academy, and Tuesday morning started like any other difficult day. He ate breakfast alone in the cafeteria, while alien students whispered and pointed from other tables. The food was nutritious, but bland. designed to be safe for many different species, rather than tasty for any particular one. Jake gathered his books and headed to advanced xenobiology class. As usual, he was the first to arrive. Professor Zixith glided into the room moments later, her pale blue skin glowing softly in the artificial light. She did not acknowledge Jake's greeting. Other students filed in slowly. There was Buzzik, whose insect-like body clicked and hummed as he moved. The hive-mind student shared thoughts with others of his species across the galaxy, making him incredibly smart but difficult to understand. Next came Coral Reef Song, an aquatic being who wore a water-filled breathing apparatus and moved with fluid grace. Her people had evolved in the deepest oceans of their homeworld. Logic Stream Gamma entered with precise, calculated steps. Zentarian's four-lobed brain could process mathematical concepts that would take Jake hours to understand. Behind him floated Shimmer, a voidling whose body seemed to be made of starlight and shadow. The ethereal being could manipulate quantum fields with pure thought. Vera Ninesongs perched on a specially designed seat, her feathered body bright yellow and green. Her species had evolved from prey animals and still retained many of those instincts. She always sat near the exit and watched for danger. The last to arrive was Granite Voice, being made of living stone whose homeworld had gravity 3 times stronger than Earth's. Professor Zixth waited until all 30 students had taken their seats. "Today we will conduct practical examinations instead of our usual lecture," she announced. Her crystalline voice carried easily through the room. "You will demonstrate your species' natural responses to biological threats." Jake felt his stomach clench. Practical exams were always worse than written tests. There was no way to hide or blend in during hands-on demonstrations. "Each of you will enter the biosimulation chamber," Professor Zix continued. "The computer will generate a predator from your homeworld's ecosystem. You must demonstrate how your species naturally responds to such threats. This will show us your evolutionary adaptations and survival instincts." Holographic displays appeared around the room, showing various alien creatures. Jake saw things with too many teeth, others with poisonous spines, and some that seemed to be made of pure energy. Each looked perfectly designed to kill beings from specific worlds. "Who would like to go first?" Professor Zixith asked. Buzzik raised one of his 4 arms. "I will demonstrate hive mind responses to tunnel predators." The class moved to the observation area around the biosimulation chamber. The room was a perfect cube about 20 feet on each side, with walls that could create any environment. Buzzik entered through the airlock, and the simulation began. The chamber transformed into an underground cave system with narrow tunnels and loose dirt. A massive worm-like creature burst from the ground, its circular mouth filled with spinning teeth. It was as thick as a tree trunk and moved incredibly fast. Through the soil, Buzzik immediately began releasing chemical signals. Jake could see the pheromone clouds spreading through the air. The giant worm stopped its attack and began moving in confused circles. Within minutes, it had retreated back underground, completely disoriented by the chemical signals. "Excellent. Use of species-specific pheromone warfare," Professor Zixith noted as Buzzik exited the chamber. Next, Coral Reef Song went next. Her simulation created an underwater environment with glowing coral formations. A bioluminescent predator fish attacked from the darkness, its body flashing with hypnotic light patterns meant to confuse prey. But Coral Reef Song was faster and more graceful in the water. She used the coral formations as cover and confused the predator with her own light displays until it gave up and swam away, one by one. Jake watched his classmates face creatures from their homeworlds. Logic Stream Gamma used mathematical calculations to predict his predator's movement patterns and avoided its attacks with computer-like precision. Shimmer simply phased out of physical reality when an energy-based hunter tried to consume her. Vera Ninesongs used her prey species instincts to hide and stay perfectly still until her predator lost interest. Each demonstration showed how perfectly adapted each species was to survive on their homeworld. The students had evolved exactly the right responses to deal with their planet's dangers. Finally, only Jake remained. The classroom fell completely silent. Even the usually chattering featherfolk stopped their constant preening to watch. Professor Zixith's expression was unreadable. As she moved to the simulation control panel, "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice carrying a tone Jake had never heard before. It sounded almost like anticipation. "Your test subject will be a Terran apex predator. The system has selected from your planet's historical database." Jake heard several sharp intakes of breath from his classmates. The Zentarians' mathematical minds were probably already calculating kill statistics and survival probabilities. The fragile voidlings seemed to phase partially out of existence from fear. "A kind of predator?" Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Professor Zixith's pale blue skin seemed to glow brighter. A Siberian tiger, adult male, approximately 600 pounds, from the forests of northern Asia. The reaction from the class was immediate. His clicking became rapid and panicked. Coral Reef Song's breathing apparatus bubbled frantically. Logic Stream Gamma began muttering calculations about bite force and claw length. Even Granite Voice, whose people were incredibly tough, shifted nervously on his stone feet. Jake had seen tigers before, but only in zoos and nature documentaries. He knew they were among Earth's most powerful predators, capable of taking down prey much larger than humans. 600-pound tiger could kill a human in seconds. "Are you ready, Mr. Morrison?" Professor Zixith asked. Jake nodded, though his mouth felt dry. He walked to the chamber entrance on shaking legs. Through the observation windows, he could see 30 pairs of alien eyes watching him. Some looked curious. Others appeared frightened. But most seemed to be waiting for confirmation of everything they believed about humans and their violent nature. The airlock sealed behind Jake with a soft hiss. The chamber walls began to change, creating a forest environment with tall trees and thick undergrowth. The air became humid and filled with the scent of earth and growing things. Sunlight filtered through the leaves above, creating patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. For a moment, Jake felt almost at home. The simulated forest reminded him of camping trips with his family back on Earth. But then the air shimmered. The tiger appeared. It was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. The massive cat stood 20 feet away, its orange and black striped coat perfect camouflage in the dappled forest light. Golden eyes focused on Jake with the intensity of a creature born to hunt. The tiger's muscles rippled under its fur as it shifted into a hunting crouch. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Through the observation windows, he saw his classmates pressed against the glass. Some had turned away, unable to watch. What they expected to happen next, Professor Zixith stood with her hands on the emergency controls, ready to end the simulation if the violence became too extreme. The tiger's ears flattened against its head. Its tail lashed back and forth. Every line of its body spoke of deadly purpose. This was a predator that had evolved to kill large, dangerous prey. This was a creature that feared nothing on its homeworld. Jake knew that in the wild, a human would have almost no chance against such a predator. Tigers were faster, stronger, and armed with claws and teeth that could tear through steel. Every survival instinct Jake possessed screamed at him to run, to fight, or to signal for help. But as Jake looked into those golden eyes, he remembered something his grandfather had told him during a camping trip years ago. "Son," the old man had said while they watched deer grazing in a meadow, "every living thing on this planet is just trying to survive and be comfortable. Most of the time, if you're not threatening something, it won't threaten you." The tiger crouched lower, preparing to spring, its claws extended, each one capable of tearing through flesh and bone. The alien students expected to witness the violent clash between two Earth predators. The confirmation of every story they had heard about the deadly nature of humans in their homeworld. But Jake Morrison did something that none of them expected. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about humans and the nature of true strength. Jake slowly raised both hands in front of him, palms facing outward. His movements were careful and deliberate, like he was trying not to startle a nervous animal. The tiger's golden eyes tracked every motion, its massive body still coiled too. "Spring, easy there, big guy," Jake said in a low, calm voice that barely carried to the observation windows. I know you're confused. This isn't your territory, and I'm not your enemy. The tiger's ears twitched at the sound of Jake's voice. Tail stopped lashing quite so violently. The great cat tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand what this strange two-legged creature was doing. Through the observation windows, the alien students pressed closer to the glass. Buzzik's clicking had stopped completely. Coral. Reef Song's breathing apparatus had gone silent. Even Logic Stream Gamma had stopped his constant mathematical muttering. Every being in the classroom was focused on the impossible scene playing out before them. Jake carefully lowered himself to the ground, moving slowly until he was sitting cross-legged on the forest floor, kept his hands visible and avoided, looking directly into the tiger's eyes. His grandfather had taught him that direct eye contact was a challenge to most wild animals. That's right, Jake continued, his voice steady and soothing. I'm not running away, and I'm not trying to fight you. We're both just trying to figure out what's happening here. The tiger remained in its hunting crouch, but something had changed. The deadly tension in its muscles seemed to ease slightly. Its breathing slowed from the rapid panting of a predator. Ready to strike to something more normal? Professor Zixith stood frozen at the control panel, her pale blue hand hovering over the emergency shutdown button. Her crystalline voice was barely a whisper. This is impossible. The behavioral matrix shows this creature should have attacked by now. Jake reached slowly into his backpack, moving with the same careful deliberation he had shown since the simulation began. The tiger's eyes followed his movements, but it did not crouch lower or prepare to spring. Anything. It seemed curious about what the human was doing. You're probably hungry, Jake said, as he pulled out his lunch pack. I bet this whole situation has you stressed out. I know how that feels. He unwrapped a protein bar with slow, predictable movements. The tiger's black nose twitched as it caught the scent of the food. Its ears perked forward slightly, a sign of interest rather than aggression. Jake broke off a small piece of the protein bar and held it in his open palm. This isn't meat, but it's got some good stuff in it, nuts and grains and things like that. Tossed the piece gently so it landed halfway between himself and the tiger. The great cat's eyes followed the arc of the food through the air. It landed on the forest floor with a soft thud. The tiger rose from its crouch and padded over to investigate. Its massive paws made no sound on the simulated forest floor. It sniffed the protein bar piece carefully, then picked it up with surprising delicacy and ate it in one bite. The classroom erupted in confused sounds. Buzzik began clicking rapidly in what Jake had learned was the hive mind equivalent of excited chatter. Viranine songs made musical trilling sounds that meant amazement in her species. The Zentarians were calculating frantically, trying to understand behavior that did not match their mathematical models. Jake broke off another piece and tossed it a little closer to himself. The tiger approached without hesitation this time, eating the food and looking expectantly for more. Each piece brought the massive predator closer, until it was sitting just an arm's length away from Jake. You're not so scary, Jake said softly, though he was careful not to make any sudden movements. You're just a big cat trying to make sense of a strange situation. The tiger's golden eyes studied Jake's face. There was intelligence there, a thinking mind trying to understand this unusual encounter. The great cat had probably never met a human before, but it was learning that this particular human posed no threat. Jake held out his hand, palm up, letting the tiger catch his scent. The massive head lowered, and Jake felt the rough warmth of the tiger's tongue as it licked his palm.
Ow.
The sensation sent a thrill through him, but he remained perfectly still. Good boy, Jake whispered. Or girl.
I can't really tell from here.
And I don't think you'd appreciate me checking. The tiger made a sound that was somewhere between a grunt and a purr. It was a sound of contentment, the kind of noise a house cat might make when being petted. But this was no house cat. This was 600 pounds of apex predator making friendly sounds at a human jaw. Jake slowly reached out and scratched behind one of the tiger's ears. The great cat's eyes closed in pleasure, and the purring sound grew louder. In moments, the tiger had moved close enough that Jake could feel its warmth. Professor Six's composed expression had completely cracked. The simulation's behavioral programming is based on documented Terran predator patterns, she said, her voice rising in confusion. That creature should be attempting to kill you. Every piece of data we have about your species suggests violent confrontation with apex predators. Jake looked up from where he was now, gently rubbing the tiger's massive head. The great cat had rolled partly onto its side, exposing its belly in a display of complete trust. Why would it want to kill me? I'm not threatening it. I'm not trying to take its food or territory, and I'm not acting like prey. He continued his gentle petting as he spoke. Tigers are smart animals. They don't waste energy on fights they don't need to have. This guy figured out pretty quickly that I wasn't dangerous to him. Schmer, the Voidling student, phased partially into visibility. Her voice sounded like wind chimes when she spoke. But the reports say humans are apex predators. I can too, apex predators. Coexists peacefully. Jake smiled, still scratching the tiger's ears. Being able to hunt doesn't mean you have to hunt everything you meet. Humans learned a long time ago that some things are more valuable alive than dead. The tiger had now rolled completely onto its side, looking for all the world like an enormous house cat, enjoying a belly rub. Its powerful legs, each one capable of delivering a killing blow, were relaxed and still. Its claws, which could tear through steel, were retracted. On Earth, Jake continued, humans learned to live alongside predators, shared territory with wolves, bears, big cats, and all sorts of dangerous animals. Sometimes we fought them, but more often we just stayed out of each other's way. Logic Stream Gamma pressed closer to the observation window. But humans domesticated wolves. That suggests dominance, not coexistence. Not dominance, Jake corrected. Partnership. The wolves that became dogs chose to work with humans because it benefited them too. They got regular food, protection, and companionship. In return, they helped us hunt and guarded our camps. The tiger was now purring so loudly that the sound resonated through the chamber. It had completely relaxed, trusting this strange human to continue providing the pleasant sensation of being petted. My species survived on Earth not just because we could fight, Jake said. We survived because we could think beyond fighting. We learned when to be aggressive and when to be peaceful. We figured out the difference between a real threat and something that was just scared or confused. Professor Zix stared at the scene before her. A human, supposedly one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, was calmly petting a massive tiger that should have killed him minutes ago. Everything she thought she knew about humans and their violent nature was being challenged by this simple act of compassion. How did you know it wouldn't attack? She asked. Jake looked thoughtful. As he continued petting the contented tiger, I guess I just remembered that every living thing wants the same basic things. Food safety, comfort, and to be left alone when they're not bothering anyone else. This tiger wasn't hunting me because it was hungry or protecting territory. It was just confused and maybe a little scared. The simulation timer chimed, indicating that Jake's test period was complete. The forest environment began to fade. The tiger's form became translucent as the program prepared to end. Jake gave the great cat one final scratch behind the ears. Thanks for trusting me, buddy. Hope you get back to wherever home is for you. The tiger looked at Jake one last time with those intelligent golden eyes, then faded away as the simulation ended. Jake stood up and brushed dirt from his clothes, looking completely calm despite having just spent 15 minutes petting one of Earth's most dangerous predators. The observation room was completely silent. 30 alien students stared at Jake. As if seeing him for the first time, Professor Zixith stood motionless at the control panel. Her pale blue skin flickering with patterns Jake had never seen before, as Jake walked toward the chamber exit. He could hear whispers starting behind him. But these whispers were different from the ones he had grown used to hearing. Instead of fear and suspicion, he heard curiosity and amazement. How did he do that? I've never seen anything like it. Maybe humans aren't what we thought they were. Jake stepped out of the chamber and rejoined his classmates. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he didn't feel like a dangerous outsider. He felt like someone who had just taught an important lesson, though he wasn't entirely sure what that lesson was. What he did know was that everything had changed in those 15 minutes with the tiger. News of Jake's exam spread through the academy faster than anyone expected. By dinner time, students from every department were talking about the human who had petted a Siberian tiger. By the next morning, video recordings of the session had been uploaded to the Galactic Communication Network. Jake discovered this when he walked into the cafeteria for breakfast and found himself surrounded by curious aliens. For the first time since arriving at the academy, students actually wanted to sit with him. They asked questions in dozens of different languages, all translated by the Universal Communication System. "How did you know the tiger wouldn't hurt you?" asked a student whose species looked like walking crystals. "Do all humans have this ability?" Wondered a being made of what appeared to be living metal. "Can you teach us to communicate with predators?" Requested a small, furry creature with huge eyes. Jake tried to answer their questions while eating his breakfast, but the attention was overwhelming. He had gone from being avoided to being the center of attention overnight. It was confusing and exciting at the same time. Professor Zixith did not show up for xenobiology class that day. Instead, a substitute teacher announced that the class was canceled due to curriculum review. Jake wondered if his demonstration had caused some kind of problem. 3 days later, Jake received a message on his student communication device. Dr. Lisa Carter, head of Human Cultural Studies, wanted to see him immediately. The message was marked as urgent. Jake had never met Dr. Carter before, though Dr. Thorne had mentioned her. She was one of only 3 humans working at the academy. She was considered an expert on human behavior and culture. Her office was in the same building as Dr. Thorne's, but much larger. The walls were covered with pictures from Earth showing humans in different situations. There were photos of people helping injured animals, scientists studying in laboratories, artists creating beautiful paintings, and children playing together. In parks, Dr. Carter was a woman in her 40s, with short brown hair and intelligent green eyes. She looked tired, as if she had not slept much lately. "Please sit down, Jake," she said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked to see you." "Is it about the tiger?" Jake asked. "Oh yes, it's definitely about the tiger." Dr. Carter moved to her desk and activated a holographic display. "Do you have any idea what you've started?" The display showed news reports from across the galaxy. Jake could see his face on screens throughout known space. Headlines in dozens of languages scrolled past, all translated into English by the Universal System. Human student befriends deadly predator? New understanding of Deathworld species? Are humans more than just killers? Galactic military reviews, human threat assessment. Jake felt his stomach drop. "I just petted a cat. I didn't mean to cause all this trouble." Dr. Carter laughed, but it was a tired sound. "You didn't cause trouble, Jake. You've solved a problem that's been building for decades. But you also created some new challenges." She changed the display to show a meeting room filled with alien officials. "This is an emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council. They're trying to figure out what your demonstration means for their understanding of humanity." "What do they think it means?" "That's complicated." Dr. Carter sat down across from Jake. "For 50 years, ever since humans first made contact with galactic civilization, other species have been afraid of us. They knew Earth was a dangerous planet. They knew humans had fought wars and developed powerful weapons. They assumed we were barely controlled killers who would eventually turn violent." Jake remembered Dr. Thorne's warnings about prejudice. And now they're confused. Everything they thought they knew about human nature has been challenged by a college student petting a tiger. Dr. Carter smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "The Galactic Defense Council has been planning for human aggression for decades. They have military strategies, evacuation plans, and defensive alliances all designed to contain the human threat." "But there is no human threat," Jake said. "Exactly. And that's what has them so confused." Dr. Carter changed the display again, showing a series of graphs and charts. "These are human achievements that other species have ignored because they didn't fit the narrative of humans as violent predators." Jake looked at the data. There were charts showing human medical advances that had saved millions of lives, environmental restoration projects that had brought dead worlds back to life, and peaceful. Exploration missions that had made contact with dozens of new species without firing a single shot. Why didn't anyone pay attention to this before? Jake asked. Because it's easier to focus on the scary parts, Dr. Carter explained. Humans do have an impressive military capability. We have conquered hostile environments and survived in conditions that would kill most other species. But what the galaxy missed is that we also chose when not to use that capability. She stood up and moved to the window that looked out over the Academy campus. Your demonstration with the tigers showed something that no one expected to see. A human choosing compassion over violence, understanding over aggression, cooperation over dominance. But that's just normal human behavior, Jake protested. Not according to galactic understanding. As far as most species knew, humans were apex predators who solved problems through force. They never considered that we might have evolved beyond our basic instincts. The door chimed, and Dr. Thorne entered the office. He looked as tired as Dr. Carter, but he was smiling. Jake, he said, I think you should know that your little demonstration has caused the biggest shift in galactic politics in 50 years. How, Doctor? Thorne activated another display showing a map of galactic space. 3 major military alliances have announced that they're reconsidering their defensive strategies against human expansion. The Zentarian Mathematical Union has requested formal cultural exchanges with human colonies. And the Aetherian Peace Council has invited Earth to join their non-aggression treaty. Jake stared at the map. All because I petted a tiger? All because you showed them that humans are capable of making choices, Dr. Carter corrected. Every other species in the galaxy acts according to their evolutionary programming. Predators hunt, prey, animals hide, hive minds share information. Energy beings manipulate force fields, but humans can choose to act against their instincts. We call it evolutionary transcendence, Dr. Thorne added. It's the theoretical ability of a species to consciously override their survival programming for a greater good. Most scientists thought it was impossible. Humans do it all the time, Jake said. We have people who risk their lives to save strangers. We protect endangered species instead of hunting them. We create art and music instead of just focusing on survival. Exactly, Dr. Carter said. And that's what the galaxy is finally beginning to understand. Humans aren't just dangerous because we can be violent. We're remarkable because we can. Choose not to be violent. The communication device on Dr. Carter's desk chimed with an incoming message. She read it quickly, then looked up with surprise. Jake, you've been invited to speak at the Galactic Council of Sciences. They want to hear directly from you about human behavior and decision-making. Jake felt overwhelmed. I'm just a student. I don't know anything about galactic politics or interspecies relations. You know the most important thing, Dr. Thorne said. You know how to see beyond fear and prejudice to find common ground. That's exactly what the galaxy needs to learn. Dr. Carter turned off the displays and sat back down. Of course, you don't have to accept the invitation. This is a lot of pressure to put on a college student. Jake thought about his first weeks at the academy, when other students avoided him and professors treated him like a dangerous animal. He thought about Professor Zixith's cold questions and the whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. Then he thought about the tiger and how a simple act of kindness had changed everything. When do they want me to speak? He asked. Dr. Carter smiled.
Next week.
The session is titled Redefining Humanity, Lessons from a Deathworld Species. Jake took a deep breath. Then I guess I better figure out what I'm going to say. As he left Dr. Carter's office, Jake realized that his time at the academy had become something much bigger than just getting an education. He had accidentally become an ambassador for his entire species. The responsibility was both terrifying and exciting. But if a simple act of compassion toward a tiger could change how the galaxy saw humanity, maybe there was hope for even greater understanding in the future. Maybe the real lesson wasn't about humans at all, but about the importance of looking beyond first impressions to find the truth underneath. Jake walked back to his dormitory, already thinking about what he would say to the most important gathering of alien scientists in the galaxy. He had a week to prepare, and he wanted to make sure he got it right. The week passed quickly, and Jake found himself standing outside the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council of Sciences. The building was enormous, built to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species. Through the massive doors, Jake could hear the sounds of thousands of beings gathering for what news reports were calling the most important interspecies dialogue in galactic history. Dr. Carter and Dr. Thorne stood beside him, both trying to look encouraging despite their obvious nervousness. Jake wore his best clothes, a simple blue suit that his mother had sent from Earth, along with a note wishing him luck. Remember, Dr. Carter said, just be yourself. Tell them what you told us about the tiger. Don't try to speak for all of humanity. But I am speaking for all of humanity, Jake replied, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. What if I say something wrong? Dr. Thorne placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder. Jake, you've already changed everything just by being kind to a frightened animal. Trust yourself. The doors opened, and an usher who looked like a walking tree gestured for them to enter. Jake walked into the largest room he had ever seen. The assembly hall stretched up and out in all directions, with seating areas designed for species of every possible shape and size. Some delegates floated in the air, others sat in pools of water, and still others hung from the ceiling like bats. At the center of the hall was a simple speaking platform. Jake's stomach lurched when he realized that in a few minutes he would be standing there. With thousands of alien eyes watching him, the current speaker was finishing his presentation about quantum field dynamics. Jake tried to pay attention, but his mind kept wandering to what he was going to say. He had written and rewritten his speech dozens of times, but nothing seemed adequate for such an important moment. Our next speaker, announced the session moderator, a being whose species Jake didn't recognize, is Jake Morrison of Earth. He will address the topic understanding human decision-making processes. Jake walked to the platform on shaking legs. The assembly hall fell completely silent as he reached the microphone. He looked out at the sea of alien faces and felt his prepared speech disappear from his mind. "Hello," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm a biology student from a planet called Earth." He paused, trying to remember his opening lines, but they were gone. Instead, he found himself thinking about his first day at the academy and how lonely and frightened he had felt. A few weeks ago, I took a test where I had to face a tiger from my homeworld. Everyone expected me to fight it or run away from it, but I didn't do either of those things. I petted it instead. A ripple of movement went through the assembly as translators converted his words into hundreds of different languages. People have been asking me how I knew the tiger wouldn't hurt me. The truth is, I didn't know. I just hoped it wouldn't. You see, I've been scared and confused a lot since I came to the academy. Other students avoided me because they thought I was dangerous. Professors treated me like I might attack someone at any moment. Jake looked around the hall and saw that he had everyone's complete attention. When I saw that tiger, I recognized something in its eyes. It was scared and confused, just like I had been. It didn't know where it was or what was happening. It wasn't trying to hunt me. It was just trying to understand a strange situation. He took a deep breath and continued. My grandfather taught me something when I was little. He said that most of the time, when something seems dangerous, it's really just frightened. The tiger wasn't my enemy. It was just another living thing trying to figure out what was going on. Gah. A delegate from the Etherian Peace Council raised a graceful hand. Mr. Morrison, your species has a reputation for violence. How do you explain this apparent contradiction? Jake thought about the question carefully. I think maybe the galaxy has been looking at only part of the human story. Yes, humans can be violent when we need to be. We've fought wars and developed weapons, but we've also done other things. He gestured to the diverse assembly around him. Humans have doctors who spend their whole lives healing people they've never met. We have teachers who help children learn, even when those children aren't their own. We have artists who create beautiful things just because beauty makes life better. Another delegate spoke up, this one from a species that looked like living crystal. But humans are apex predators. How can predators choose not to hunt? The same way intelligent beings can choose to do anything, Jake replied. Humans figured out a long time ago that some things are more valuable alive than dead. We learned that cooperation often works better than competition. We discovered that helping others usually helps ourselves too. A Zentarian delegate's mathematical mind processed this information. You're suggesting that humans have evolved beyond their biological programming? Not evolved beyond it, Jay corrected. We still have all the same instincts as our ancestors. We can still be aggressive when we need to be. But we learn to think before we act. We learn to choose our responses instead of just reacting automatically. The questions continued for over an hour. Delegates wanted to know about human emotions, human decision-making, human social structures, and human relationships with other species, Jake answered as honestly as he could, drawing on his own experiences and the things he had learned growing up on Earth. Finally, the session moderator called for closing statements. Jake looked out at the thousands of alien faces watching him and realized that many of them looked different than they had when he started speaking. The fear and suspicion had been replaced by curiosity and interest. I think the most important thing I can tell you, Jake said, is that humans aren't perfect. We make mistakes. We sometimes choose badly. But we try to learn from our errors and do better next time. He paused, thinking about the tiger and how that simple moment had changed everything. The galaxy has been preparing for human aggression for 50 years. Maybe it's time to prepare for human friendship instead. We're not looking to conquer anyone or take over anything. We just want to learn and explore and maybe make some friends along the way. Jake stepped away from the microphone to thunderous applause that came in many different forms. Some species clapped, others made musical sounds, and still others flashed. Lights or changed colors. The approval was universal and overwhelming. As Jake left the platform, he was surrounded by delegates wanting to shake his hand or perform their species-equivalent greeting. The Etherean representative invited Earth to join their peace alliance. The Zentarian Mathematical Council requested cultural exchange programs. Even the military representatives seemed interested in cooperation rather than conflict. Dr. Carter found Jake in the crowd, her eyes bright with tears of pride. Jake, do you realize what you've just accomplished? I told them about petting a tiger, Jake said, still somewhat stunned by the response. You told them that strength and kindness aren't opposites, Dr. Thorne added, appearing beside them. You showed them that the most dangerous species in the galaxy chooses to be gentle. 3 months later, Jake stood in the same academy cafeteria where he had once eaten alone. But now the tables around him were filled with friends from dozens of different species. Buzik was explaining hive mind philosophy to anyone who would listen. Coral Reef Song was teaching swimming techniques in the academy pools. Logic Stream Gamma had discovered that human mathematical intuition complemented Zentarian logical processing in fascinating ways. Professor Zixtach approached his table carrying her lunch tray. Mr. Morrison, may I join you? Of course, Professor, Jake said, making room beside him. She sat down and looked at him with an expression very different from the cold suspicion he remembered from his first classes. I owe you another apology, Jake. I spent so much time fearing what humans might do that I never considered what humans actually do. What's that, Professor? Choose to be better than your instincts require, she said simply. Jake looked around. The cafeteria had all his friends talking, laughing, and learning from each other. Students who had once avoided him now sought him out for advice and friendship. The whispers had changed from fear to admiration, but the most important change was in how Jake saw himself. He was still human, still from the so-called death world, called Earth. But being human meant something entirely different now. It meant having the strength to choose kindness over conflict, understanding over assumption, and hope over fear. The galaxy was still learning about humans, but now they were learning the whole truth. And perhaps most importantly, humans were learning about themselves. They were more than just survivors from a dangerous world. They were beings capable of transcending their own nature to become something better. Jake smiled as he listened to his friends planning their next group study session. The Deathworlder had indeed shocked everyone, but in the best possible way. Sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply choosing to be kind. And sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when not to use your power. The galaxy was a bigger, more hopeful place, because one human chose to pet a tiger instead of fighting. It, and that, Jake thought, was a pretty good lesson for everyone.